So the Standing Committee on Public Accounts was to pay a visit to SAA as the airline struggles financially. In a report that has been given to Scopa, SAA has shown that it suffered a loss of 5.4 billion rand last year and another loss of 5 billion rand this year, further deepening its financial crisis. The government recently gave it 5.5 billion and will pay off 9.2 billion rand to settle its debts. Scopa Chairperson Mkhuleko Hlengwa joins us now for more. Very good evening to him. Thank you so much for joining us, Mr. Hlengwa. So I said it was to pay a visit, meaning that visit did not happen. Any particular reason why?
Well, we were supposed to have gone to SAA today because we had decided so last week, because we have not received financials from SAA for 2 years, and so we've been in a toing and froing correspondence and communication with the SAA board following our meeting on the 13th of November. Now, we had not received the information that we wanted, and a meeting which was scheduled to take place last week, Wednesday evening, did not take place because the board was not available. In response to that, the committee then decided that we would put boots on the ground and actually go to SAA as part of a process of facilitating the submission of these financial statements. Of course, it's now common cause that business rescue was triggered. And so under the circumstances, the committee felt it prudent to postpone its interaction with SAA because there's quite a number of complexities which arise insofar as this decision and course of action.
Okay, so what would those complexities be?
Well, amongst other things, of course, we need clarity in terms of who the accounting authority is, because the board, as far as I understand it, becomes redundant in business rescue. And so we need to fully understand that the business rescue practitioner will be the accounting authority, because in our view, the PFMA does not cease to operate or function because of this new set of circumstances. So we will be engaging with Parliamentary Legal Services to give us the necessary advice and guidance in terms of how we approach this matter. And there is now a greater need of collaboration between the Portfolio Committee of Public Enterprises and Scopa, so that we actually are within, we are all in our lane, for lack of a better term, to make sure that we don't duplicate functions and activities and oversight.
And this is the point I wanted to get to, Mr. Hlengwa. So are you saying that you felt it superfluous? Because I think a lot of people interpreted your visit to SAA as either putting pressure, especially in your oversight role, if they have been refusing, because that's what they've done, refused to provide you with annual financial statements.
Yeah, well, look, what we were certainly not going to do, even under these circumstances, is to take our foot off the pedal of oversight and accountability. SAA remains a state-owned entity, and the new set of circumstances actually compels us at this point in time actually to make sure that the oversight is done. We are talking here, of course, that National Treasury is going to be giving 2 billion rands. There's lenders whom are going to be giving 2 billion rands. So state funds and public funds are still going to form a feature of the rescue plan, and so it's important that we actually clear the woods. And moreover, the guidance and legal advice we need is what becomes of the status of the financial statements at this point in time, because the annual report, of course, remains absent. So we welcome, of course, the move for business rescue. We think it's a responsible course of action, but one that is long overdue, because the circumstances of collapse, the writing has been on the wall. The circumstances have been well determined for the longest of time. The scope of the Fifth Parliament went to SAA and actually figured these things out themselves.
But one thing I'm curious about, as you say, it's been a long time in coming. The company admitting to a loss of more than 10 billion rand in the past 2 years. Some would say, how could the same minds that created the problem then help fix it? Because with business rescue, it's administered by the company under an independent business rescue practitioner. So they too would be involved in rehabilitating the company.
It's two things, Deputy. One, political will. If you have a state-owned entity, under these circumstances, you need to take bold decisions, take the bull by the horns. And that political will has been long absent. And this is precisely because state capture formed a prominent feature in the affairs of SAA. And so this process is part of unraveling those particular realities. Secondly, there needs to be fundamental clarity insofar as the accounting authority, because the role of the board in these circumstances must be clearly defined. The role of the business practitioner must be clearly defined. And so when we postponed our meeting today, it's to give the Department of Public Enterprises, the board, and SAA, and of course the court processes, very important here, the space and time to arrive at a determination of the way forward. So then the oversight that we need to do is plugged in correctly. So we need to be very responsible about this. And the pressure that we have been putting on SAA came out of the fact that we cannot allow a situation where financial statements are not submitted for 2 years, because if we do that, we are actually opening the floodgates for everybody to have that discretion not to submit, and we couldn't allow that. And so SAA has found itself at the receiving end of our pressure, simply because in large part we did not have the cooperation of the board also on these matters. And so what I want to clearly say is that the oversight processes continue to be in play regardless of the circumstances which SAA finds itself in.
Okay, so let me ask this question. A government has been clear that they're looking for a private equity partner. To your mind as Scopa, which would be appropriate as a partner?
Well, we have not arrived at a determination in terms of what or who needs to be at play at SAA. We need to do first things first. One is to stabilize the airline and inspire the necessary domestic, regional and international confidence that the airline, if it's being saved, is actually going to be able to meet its short-term, medium-term and long-term obligations. Secondly, the shareholder needs to make a decision as to whether it's embarking on a private partnership arrangement and that the equity partner will come in, because once they've defined that space, then we are able to play the oversight role. If they decide to sell, that also needs to happen, because the fundamental issue here has been the issue of the going concern. And because that has not been clarified, you've had the snowballing effect of non-oversight and non-accountability in the absence of financials. So any decision or any outlook that Parliament would have cannot be in a vacuum. The basis of information is the audited financial statements and the annual reports, which are outstanding. And what we need to guard against is to have the third year now coming into motion at the end of the financial year of 3 sets of financials.
Okay, but so I need to ask this question as a final question. It is clear that it's more than financial resources that is challenging SAA. I mean, we've seen with the recent strike that it goes deeper than that with you know, the human resources aspects of it. So business rescue is all well and good, but how do you deal with that?
But the business rescue exercise needs to be the A to Z of restructuring at this point in time. We need to look at the staff establishment of SAA. We need to look at the contract management at SAA, consequence management, human resource management. We need to look at the planning in terms of routes, the global competitiveness in terms of SAA's operations. And so it can't just be about finances, because finances in the main are a large part come in at the end. It's the operations during the year, the financial year, that are important. And what we were very clear about in our observation is that there was a long-term systematic collapse of good governance at SAA. And the lack of political will to deal with that landed us in this mess. And so the non-submission of financials is as a consequence of the collapse of good governance.
Right.
I think what's important is you had a situation at SAA where at some point they were generating 31 billion rands in terms of revenue, but spending 33 billion rand. So this also goes to responsible financial management in terms of your expenditures. So what we're expecting from this business rescue exercise is to look at the whole value chain of SA operations, and then so that you can arrive at a determination on the way forward. So I think a lot of work begins now, as opposed to where we've come from. Standing
Committee on Public Accounts Chairperson Mr. Mkhuleko Hlengwa. Let's take you back to Audrey now.